Hey everyone, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, joined by IU basketball columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you after Indiana's 82-75 win over Michigan State. Indiana now 4-3 in the Big Ten. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, and this was an interesting one.
It was an interesting one.
Pretty interesting, yeah, especially coming off the week Indiana had going to Penn State, losing OG Anunoby for the season with a knee injury, also going back to last weekend, losing Juwan Morgan to a referee's foot. Yeah, gosh, it figures that would be an injury Indiana would have to deal with this year. Coming out of all that this week, an emotional week for the team behind the scenes, learning that a guy like Anunoby would not be with them the rest of the year. They came back and rediscovered their depth, basically. Had a lot of guys playing well, a lot of guys occupying roles very well, defined roles very well. A lot of guys just doing a little bit of everything to really pull this one out.
Yeah, I think the key word there for me is the rediscovered word, because I feel like this Indiana team is rediscovering a lot of things about itself right now. Maybe things that it knew and then kind of forgot as the season went on. Things that maybe it did well last year but just never quite got defined this year, particularly in terms of roles and things. And that's where, not that these injuries are necessarily a good thing, but they do serve some benefit in terms of changing the team dynamics. And it's really not unlike what happened last year with the James Blackman injury and how it changed the team dynamics. The only difference here is that maybe at least Indiana's got Juwan Morgan coming back,
Sure.
which is certainly the silver lining. But in the meantime, it seems to have found a little something. And really, you point in large part back to that Penn State game and that game-winning shot that James Blackman hit. I'm not sure we'd be having a similar conversation if that shot doesn't go in and Indiana goes on and loses in overtime that game.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would have come out and played hard today, but it would have made it a lot more difficult to bounce back if that doesn't happen. And instead, it seems like that's sort of springboarded this team, at least out of the gate today.
Yeah, fittingly, on an individual level, James Blackman Jr. was just phenomenal. Had a career high tying 33 points, the most he's ever scored in a Big Ten game, correct?
Yes.
Just a very efficient day more than anything else. Obviously he was hitting a lot of his first 6 shots, I believe,
Yes.
4 of which were threes. But 11 for 16, and for all the derision he's received for his defense, and much of it rightfully so, he's pretty solid on that end of the court today too. He actually got matched up with Miles Bridges a few times, and just in general, a really connected, complete game, maybe the most connected and complete game we've seen from James Blackman.
Yeah, obviously, I thought he was better defensively, and he's been better throughout this year. It's just there are certain times, that Maryland game sticks out. The play where he lost Herter
yeah.
for the 3, just a bad timing one, and those things are going to happen. But overall, the effort is better, the intent is better at that end of the floor. But one of the things that impressed me the most is he comes out, he's on fire, he hits those first 6 shots. This is a day where you could see James Blackman going, all right, I've got to carry this team. There's no OG, there's no
Sure.
Juwan. I've got to just jack things up. Yet he wound up only taking 16 shots on the day, went 11 of 16 from the floor. Sort of showed a maturity in knowing when to take a shot, when not to take a shot, especially in that second half. I think he had 18 in the first half, and really was fairly quiet through most of the second half until Indiana needed some buckets. And at some big times when they needed a big shot, he came up with a couple of big threes. There late in the game, had a big runner off the glass that was huge in just sort of holding the margin, holding off Michigan State at bay. So I think, you always hesitate to say somebody's turned the corner, because the second you say that, then they don't. But it certainly appears that James Blackman's making huge strides in turning that corner and sort of growing up, sort of that maturation process that we've kind of all been waiting to see.
Jimmy Buckets, that's what they call him. Scores a lot of them. You know who doesn't score a lot of buckets? Zach McRoberts. But he does basically everything else, so he kind of makes up for that. That's what he was doing today. Look, if you had blindfolded me and I was just listening to Fish call the game, I would have thought it was maybe Colin Hartman, Juwan Morgan out there. I mean, he was basically filling that role and filling it really well. What did he play?
32 minutes.
32 minutes. I think he was a team best plus 14, meaning Indiana outscored Michigan State by 14 points while he was on the floor. That is a role that all good teams have that role defined. They have at least one guy who can really give you those kind of minutes, those kind of plays. Zach McRoberts has done that in spurts this season, obviously over a much longer sustained period today. He did it again, and that's just so important to teams like this, good teams in general, and to have a guy like that who is willing to embrace that role. He started for the second time this season. Obviously, the stakes were much higher than they were against Mississippi Valley State, and to have a game like this, I thought was also encouraging in the scheme of where this team is right now.
Yeah, Zach's another guy that emerged today filling a role that Indiana's sort of had different guys in. Really all year been trying to sort of plug that Hartman role that's been missing. But with OG out, with Juwan out, with Hartman out, McRoberts really was that glue guy today. I don't know that you want him playing 32 minutes on a regular basis necessarily. I think that's a lot to ask of him. And I thought he said he wasn't fatigued in the second half. I thought he wore down a little bit in the second half, and maybe that was a reason why he got in foul trouble in the second half because of that fatigue setting in. But still, just the way he played the game, the hustle, the effort plays, and the biggest thing to me is the way he plays the game, the intensity with which he plays the game. I don't mean to say this team wasn't playing hard before, because I think they were playing hard, but what they didn't realize was that they could play harder. Mm-hmm. And I really thought today, probably the highest point, at least since the North Carolina game, if not of the season, that the effort level, the intensity level, what Tom Crean likes to call the urgency level, was just much higher out there. There was just a different gear to things today, and I have to give McRoberts a lot of credit for sort of setting the tone in that department.
You saw it from everyone. I think you mentioned in your column, Thomas Bryant was playing with that whole drive, and he was playing with it for sustained however many minutes he played. We played 29 minutes, so you saw it from him. You saw it from basically everybody. Really just impressive how everyone kind of had their own moment. Even Freddie McSwain comes in. He had a couple very raw Freddie McSwain moments where you're not really sure what he's doing with the ball. He's not really sure where he's supposed to be. But then again, he comes back, and I think much like we saw against Penn State, it has a really nice, opportune putback slam that kind of gets you going a little bit. Everyone kind of played their role very well. Devontae Green, very late in the game, hit a little runner that I think Michigan State had gotten within 4 after a second half lull. Cut what was kind of like the other night, cut a 20-point Indiana lead down to 4, and there's Devontae Green hitting a runner, boosted back up to 6, and Indiana kind of held sway the rest of the way. So everyone kind of made their mark on this game in in some ways, and now that's very important because you got 2 games on the road, and you got 3 of your next 4 on the road.
Yes.
Going to Michigan on Thursday. After that, you're right back up north at Northwestern. Return home and get
Penn State, I think.
Is it Penn State?
Yeah. I believe it's Penn State. And back to Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin's in a big game. So even with the injuries, today was encouraging. Today was encouraging just to kind of see that there is, some functional reserve in there that they can still tap into, even with their backs up against the wall to some slight degree. And now you got to kind of put it on the road, pack your defense, and go north.
Yeah, and I think this is where finding the right roles for people is huge. I was pretty critical a couple of weeks ago at the Wisconsin game with the lineup that Indiana had out there of Freddie McSwain and Zach McRoberts, and it wasn't an individual knock on those guys. It was just putting those guys together in that lineup at that time of the game just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Now today, you've got McRoberts playing one role as the starter. He had 4 guys around him that can do a lot of other things, so he can do that glue guy role, and that's fine because you've got 4 other guys out there to do those things. Freddie McSwain, when he was in the game today, he was kind of filling that role where it was just go attack the offensive glass, play some good defense, do your thing, and that's what his strength is. And so that's where you have to have guys playing to their strength, playing in the role that gives them the best chance to succeed. And then the next thing you have to do is take all those things that we saw today. Hopefully you plug Juwan Morgan back in, and don't relax and just assume, we've got a piece back, now we can kind of take it easy. No, you've got to still have that same level of effort, that same level of urgency, that playing hard level that we saw today. Bring that same thing, but bring it with a little extra piece of depth so that everybody can now go that much harder, because that's one less body that's missing to fill the gap in terms of minutes played. So it's really all the more reason to go harder, because now you're going to have that extra body to fill the role.
For what it's worth, before we shut this bad boy down, Juwan Morgan was participating, warm-up, stretched, went through layup lines, did the whole thing. Tom Crean says he's getting better. I think the fact that he was actually a full go in pregame is certainly encouraging, and certainly lends itself to perhaps getting back, on Thursday at Michigan. So we'll see how that goes. It could very well be his return date there for Juwan Morgan. So we'll see how it goes. A few more days between games, but
4 days off, 5 days off, I guess.
Yeah, with Saturday, so
going to Thursday. So yeah, I would expect Juwan Morgan to be back at least in some limited capacity
in these next 2.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
We'll see. It's interesting.
Next stop, Ann Arbor.
See you there.